Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. They did it again. Someone at Wizard of the Coast make a bit blunder and put their foot in their mouth. And if you're familiar with my channel, then you know this is my bread and butter. I tried to make a game mechanics and GM advice video, but they don't do nearly as well. If people want comments on cultural issue, I'm more than happy to provide. This is something I'm quite comfortable talking about. So, what was this big blunder? If you haven't heard about it, an executive producer at D&D, Kyle Brink, went on a podcast called Three Black Orcs for an interview. Sorry, Three Black Afflings, and said in effect that white men couldn't leave the hobby of RPG soon enough. Diversity in Dragon broke the news, I believe, and he made a very digestible short video, less than 5 minutes, with the clip of Kyle making the statement. I'll put the link of this video down in the description box here. Diversity and Dragon also did a live stream afterward on Monday evening, where I have been on for around an hour. And of course, Double D is much more moderate than I am, so I restrained myself quite a bit out of respect. I was trying to be a good guest, but even on this channel, I have to add my power level a bit, or I wouldn't be allowed on YouTube very long. The link for the live stream is also going to be in the description box. So on the Three Black Affling podcast, we could see Kyle, and that see Kyle, not see Kyle, but we could see Kyle talk about how normal white men were not the face of the hobby anymore. He used the word cis, not normal, but I'm translating here. So Kyle here pretends that when you look around the typical RPG group, that white men are not the majority. And yes, of course, if you look online and if you look at YouTube, you will get the impression that the hobby is more and more diverse. And diverse just means less white and fewer men. But yeah, if you look online, if you look at the events organized by WotC, you could get the impression that the face of the hobby is changing. But this is not organic at all. Like, those diverse people are constantly being artificially propped up and pushed to the forefront. You see this pretty important guy at WotC, Kyle. He goes on this relatively small podcast of Three Black Affling because they are black. They're not a big channel at all, and yes, they're bigger than me, but I'm starting and I can barely speak English. Like, share, and subscribe to help the channel grow. But yeah, those Three Black Affling guys, they don't get much view at all on their content unless they get a big guess, and they do get those big guests because they are black. Let's not kid ourselves. A guy like Kyle will never go give an interview to a bigger channel like RPG Pundit or Legend of Myth, or a channel like Diversity and Dragon that he does have less sub than the Three Black Affling for now, but his video does get more view than what they do. But if you go to a game store, if you go to a gaming convention, or if you look around your table at home, what you'll see more than any other thing is straight white male. And of course, saying white people should be expected. You know, the USA and Canada and even the UK are still majority white countries. And yes, this is changing rapidly by design. In the USA, amongst the under 18-year-olds, whites are already less than 50% of the population. But the RPG hobby is not that young, so you should expect to see a lot of white people. And as for it being mostly men, yes, well, men and women have different interests, and RPG are always gonna appeal more to men. So what? I don't get this need like of everything having to be equally represented. It's done, you know? And it's seen mostly into male interest that we try to push equal representation of the sex. Nobody tried to push for more men into astrology or gossip or posting lewd picture online or whatever women are into. I guess they do it a bit with the makeup thing, but I guess most men see it this push for what it is and are just not interested. But in a sense, it's like we're saying to women that what they're naturally interested into is lesser and that they should get into male hobby for some reason. You know, just say, like, let's just people enjoy whatever they enjoy. You know, this is like when you go on dating site and every woman has pictured doing like hiking and rock climbing and stuff like that. You would think that every hiking trail and every rock climbing gym would be full of women, but it's not the case. They went there once, they took some picture, they promote themselves as being into those things because they think that makes them look more interesting. They feel like if they really represent themselves when what they actually are into, they'll appear lame. And anyway, that's a different topic for another day maybe, or another channel. But RPG by their very nature, they are not for everybody and they will never be. They might want to dumb down the hobby and make it more accessible. And now we're back to this tweet by Mike Mills that if you just want rule complexity, it's only to keep minority and women out. But the hobby will always include, to some extent, like reading books and using your imagination and doing some basic maths. Otherwise, it becomes something else. Maybe like a video game, and maybe that's what they're trying to do. And you know, there's like a 13% of the population in the US that are illiterate. And that is not a racial joke. It's just happened that those numbers align. And the illiterate people might not be equally divided amongst the different race, but I'm not saying it's one-to-one either. And there's also a lot of people who can conceptualize of a imaginary scenario at all. You ask them, how would you have felt if you didn't have breakfast yesterday morning? And they'll reply to you like, I don't know, I did have breakfast yesterday. And you go, wait, but what if you didn't? And if you keep pressing, they'll just get mad. You won't get those people engaged in role playing, and trying to do so will lead to a disaster. So it's not tomorrow that we'll see the face of the actual tabletop RPG group change that much. And I can even predict one thing, that with the dwindling of the white demographic, the hobby is not just gonna get less white, it's gonna get less popular. And to come back to what Kyle said, it would have been one thing to say we want to attract more diverse people or whatever. You would think that a company would want to expand their customer base, so pandering to people who are not your customer would make sense. It's a bit annoying, to be frank. It's like when the GOP is always pandering to blacks and never ever throw a bone to the white folks who represent 85% of the people voting for them. But this is not what Carl Brink was saying here. He was basically saying, white men get out. And alright, Kyle, you first. Why don't you quit your position and leave the hobby? If you take part in the hobby at all, we don't know that for sure. And I'm gonna say something that might shock some of you here, but I'm a guy who do believe that race is real and that it matters and that it's not only skin deep. When the SJW talk about intersectionality of identity, they're not completely wrong. I'm a man, I'm white, I'm Christian, I'm of Norman descent, I've been raised in northern Quebec, and all those things are part of my identity, and they inform the person I am. But they inform, they do not dictate. There's still place for individualism. Yes, my identity can be influenced by all those groups I belong to. It exists somewhere around the intersectionality of all those different descriptor, but that doesn't make a person. It's not all what there is to be to someone. You also have lived experience and random genetic assemblage and just outright individualism and free will. Nobody's a perfect representation of a group is a part of, and people are not just the sum of all the groups they are part of. There's more to a person than that. Defining group characteristic is useful when dealing with groups. You cannot rely on them when dealing with individual. It's important to know the difference between the two type of knowledge and when to apply them. One is statistic, and the other one is, well, you're actually dealing with a person. Something is important to understand. The individual forming a group inform the average of that group, not the other way around. If you, it's not the average of a group you belong to that determine your own characteristic. If you belong to a group with an average height of 5'2", and you're 6'4", well, that doesn't make you any shorter. You're just as tall as anybody else that is 6'4", regardless of the group they belong to. And when it comes to predicting something of an individual versus predicting something of a group, I'll use an example that gamers can understand. If I'm to roll a 20-sided dice and try to predict the result beforehand, I have 95% chance of being wrong. If I'm to roll a 20-sided dice 10,000 times and predict the average result of beforehand, I have 95% chance of being right. And it's the same when dealing with individual versus dealing with groups. I'm white and I do care about white people, and I want whites to do well and good, especially in their own countries. They are my people. But the whole thing is fractal. Like I said, I belong to more than one group, and usually the more groups we share and the smaller groups we share, the more I'll see you as part of my people, and the more I want you to see you thrive. Human beings are tribal, and this is part of our nature. But that doesn't mean that it has to be done at the expense of other groups. And this is something our friend Kyle here doesn't get. He had no reason here to bash on white and tell them to get out. If he wanted to invite non-white over to the hobby, he could have done that. But no, he was specifically anti-white. And if Hasbro doesn't expressly fire his ass, that make them anti-white as well. So yeah, I could yet tell you to stop patronizing WotC, stop buying stuff from them, but I assume that most of my audience probably already do that. And the white men who are still customer of this company, well, I don't know if anything will ever make them live at that point, you know? Maybe some people are just too cocked with no self-respect whatsoever. King Waspinator of Total Party Skill was wondering the other day, when should you forgive a corporation? What if the next product they put out is actually good? Should we be allowed to buy it? Well, you're allowed to do whatever you want, but I would advise against it. If you don't like this kind of a divisiveness, or if you don't like your people being constantly trash, WotC shouldn't be seeing any more of your dollar for a long time. Could I ever forgive this company? I could, but it would take a lot. Firstly, they would have to make serious acts of contrition. Recognize that what they've been doing is wrong and apologize for it, and not try to make excuses. Just be frank about it. There can be no forgiveness without contrition. Then they would have to fire a bunch of folks, Cal Brinks and Mike Mills and all those who made anti-white comments or anti-male comments. They need to go. Then they would need to demonstrate behavior that indicate that they are willing to change and correct their attitude. And they would have to actually put out good product. So there is a path to forgiveness. Of course, I'm Christian, so we believe in redemption. But will Wizard of the Coast walk this path? Nope. So yeah, I'll keep covering the blunder by WotC and other in the hobby and give my thought about it. That's entertaining for me, to be honest. And maybe I hope that I'll be able to shift the attitude of some of you watching, but I don't have much hope that WotC will change until they absolutely need to. They will need to hit rock bottom. Some people thought that maybe their Ice book coming up, the one with the tying with the movie, would drop the woke stuff a bit. Some said that it wasn't really present in the marketing that they had been putting out. Well, here we are. And like I said, just putting out non-woke product wouldn't be enough for me to forgive them. They need to have like contrition. They had no problem going on to the humiliation ritual of like trash talking about their own people and crawling on their belly like worm in front of blacks. You know, it's disgusting, truly. Well, now they should humiliate themselves a bit and saying that they were wrong and that the woke strategy was a mistake, and that they're pandering to degenerate and people who don't care about the hobby was a mistake. Until then, in my book, they are verboten. So that's what I had to say about the subject. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think about the soul ordeal down in the insult section below. Have a good day and thank you for watching. Take care.